Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org, for more info, or you can email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Al Shapiro. We'll be discussing his fantastic book, Evangeline Evershine and the Case of the Biggest Disappearance Imaginable, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And I will say, Al was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business, Ingress Advertising Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, move it through Ingress. You can find them at ingressadvertising.com. And guys, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Al here on the line because his book we're going to be discussing, first and foremost, understand it's a fictional narrative, okay? So it's created with the emphasis of entertainment. But what's so valuable about his narrative is not only is it entertaining, but it's also educational. And it's such a fun ride for you to take with your kids. It's a fantastic gift for you to get for anybody else's. And listen, Al is the expert, okay? He's written the book. He's done the research. He's going to be able to articulate all the nuances in his book much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's bring him here with us. Al, first and foremost, thank you so much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very well, Al. Thank you very much for asking. Listen, it's a pleasure having you on. I know we have a lot to discuss and a lot to get into. Now, before we jump into your book, let's hold off slightly, Al. Talk to our listening audience. Give us some more information about yourself.
Well, nothing particular, nothing spectacular. I'm an engineer, an electronics engineer, and I spent part of my career being an engineer and the rest of it being in real estate. So that pretty much sums it up.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Al, don't be so modest. I mean, first and foremost, that's an impressive background, being an engineer, switching to real estate. I mean, I have to ask, what inspired you to switch from that background career-wise to a creative journey and become a writer?
Well, it's very interesting, and it's not that easy to answer. But primarily, I have two great grandchildren, Eloise and William, and we used to read to them when they would stay with us. We used to read to them at bedtime. I could see their reaction and what they were interested in, and the kinds of things that they were interested in. And I've always been interested in space, always. It's always fascinated me. So I just had the inspiration, I don't know, a couple of years ago to write a book about space for children so that they would be able to learn about space. And it could still be fun because there would be a story associated with it, of course, a fictional story. And that's what got me started.
Wonderful. Now, Al, listen, we know that this book, of course, as you stated, this started really for your grandchildren, right? And to kind of give them a story that they could follow, and also all at the same time follow up on something that you were interested in, which was space, and become much more knowledgeable in that. Now, why didn't it end there? I mean, what did you feel or see that made you continue on this journey and put this book out for the public to be able to partake in as well?
It was just something that at the time just seemed like it would be fun. Mm-hmm. I started it, and it was fun. It was fun all along. And I wrote the book, got an illustrator to illustrate the various concepts in the book, and then got it published.
Absolutely.
Actually, getting it published was probably the most difficult part.
Well, we know that is a completely different ballgame in and of itself, right? Writing the book is one thing. Getting it published is something else, and we'll definitely touch up on that later on in the interview. Now, Al, without further ado, let's jump right in. Evangeline Evershine in the case of the biggest disappearance imaginable. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, first of all, I got the name Evershine from the fact that this is about the sun. So I figured Evershine would be an appropriate name as a last name. And then since her last name was going to start with a D, I wanted her first name also to start with a D. So that's what I came up with, Evangeline. And it had to be a multiple syllable name, not like John or something like that. So that got me started, and that's how I came up with the name. And the rest, I just started writing. And if there's anything I wasn't sure of, I checked the information just to make sure it was all correct.
Now, Al, let's go a little bit more into detail with the storyline. So we know that this story revolves around space. Talk to us a little bit more about your protagonist, Evangeline Evershine, and the journey that she embarks upon.
She was very fortunate in that she has a father, who's an astronaut. So they were able to take off in their spaceship and just investigate the sun, what it does, where it moves to, what it shines on, and so forth.
Fantastic. Now, with regards to the specific age group that you are writing for, now again, we know that this started for your grandchildren. So we know why it was a particular interest at the beginning, but then when you continue to write, you put the book out for the masses to partake in as well, you specifically stayed with the children's age group. Why was it important for you to do so?
Well, no, that's what I had intended at the very beginning, to make it a book for children and of interest to children in a way that was interesting to children with a storyline, but with the storyline also giving a lot of facts about space, particularly about the sun.
Now, Al, let's talk about that research that you did, because of course, even though this is a fictional narrative, you are talking about space, and I know this is a particular interest to you. So what type of research did you do in preparation for this book?
Well, I didn't really have to do much research. I did check some facts just to make sure that I was correct on the numbers. But what is in the book about space, I pretty much knew anyway.
Perfect. So the research was already conducted just through your years of looking into it yourself, right?
Yeah, I've known these facts pretty much all my life.
Fantastic. Guys, again, here on the line with Al Shapiro. We're discussing his book, Evangeline Evershine and the Case of the Biggest Disappearance Imaginable, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Now, Al, as we continue this interview, I'm curious, articulate for our listening audience, what would you say was a highlight for you in writing this book? Or if not a highlight, maybe something that surprised you that you weren't expecting prior to embarking upon the journey.
Well, when I started writing, I never knew I would ever get to this point of actually having the book published. So every step of the way was really a thrill. It was a thrill while I was preparing the text. It was a thrill seeing the illustrator come up with appropriate illustrations. And there was a thrill seeing the publisher actually come out with a book, although that took a long time. Just the work of the publisher took about a year. But it was a thrill. And I guess the biggest thrill was seeing the book published and on the market and being sold by Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Every step of the way was a thrill. It's a big thrill.
Al, with this particular book, I remember when I was doing my research on it, it seemed, again, it's such a creative and such a unique narrative that just from doing the research, I wanted more. And I was hoping that a series of books would be created following Evangeline Evershine.
This is the first of a series. I have other books in mind. As a matter of fact, I'm working on the next one right now. which will be about the moon. And then the one after that will be about the stars. And the one after that will be about, I'm calling it the case of the sweats and the chills, which will be about what creates summer and winter. And then the next one, the case of the heavenly fight, which will be about the sun and the clouds. So I have a whole series planned. So the first book about the sun is simply the first one.
Fantastic. And yeah, that's where actually I was going to go, because again, doing the research, it hit me instantly. This is a perfect protagonist that you would want to follow on a series of books. And I'm so glad that you've articulated that. You know, guys, what is so important about what Al has done here is it's not just a creative book for entertainment that he created for his grandchildren. I mean, that in and of itself is beautiful. But what is so important about it is really the education that so many children are going to be able to receive. And we know that times have changed. Society is changing. It's constantly changing. Our educational system needs to change right alongside it. And the fact that Al had the wherewithal to put this book in such a creative way, a creative narrative, and then allow the children that partake in this journey to be able to learn about the sun, to be able to learn about the moon, about the stars, about the changes in climate. That is such a unique way to do it, because then really what he's doing is he's bringing the education to the children rather than the children to the education, which I think traditionally is how the education system is worked. And by Al creating this book and making it fun, making it a great journey for you to take with your children, and then have them still learn about the sun, the moon, the stars, the changing of climate, it is so unique and so wonderful. Thank you very much for what you've been able to do, Al. And we look forward to the rest of the books in the series. Now, as we start to tie up this fantastic interview, Al, I know we've already started to go into it slightly, but I want to give you the opportunity to really hone in on it and articulate it to our listening audience, please. You started to touch up on just publishing the book and how that in and of itself was its own journey. Now, Al, articulate to our listening audience, what advice would you be able to give a new writer, someone just starting out?
I don't think I'm in a position to give anybody else advice. I would give anybody advice for anything they plan to do, and that is just stick with it.
Absolutely. Well, Al, again, you're so humble, man. You're so modest. I absolutely feel you're in a position to give advice. You've published a book. You've written it and you've gotten it published. That in and of itself makes you a person with valuable information in which you can impart. So I appreciate your modesty, but you absolutely can give advice, and the advice that you gave was perfect. Stick with it. Guys, that is great advice for any artist, but that's valuable information for any individual out there. Whatever your passion is, whatever your journey that you're taking is, at the end of the day, it's gonna come with its fair share of adversity and challenges. That's just part of life. But keep your head down. Your dreams will come to fruition, but persistence is key. One last time, here on the line with Als Shapiro. We just finished discussing his fantastic book, Evangeline Evershine and the Case of the Biggest Disappearance Imaginable, available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Al, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Thank you.